American public schools were built by the industrialists to mass produce employees for the factories. So we standardized mass production of students. We had to, it was a necessity. And now we're in the information age, but we're still using a school system that was built for the machine age. Why aren't we investing collectively in the use of technology to transform public schools or education? We've transformed retail, we've transformed space. Look at the internet. The internet wouldn't be if 20 different companies tried to create their own. We said, let's create an open platform. That's what has to happen for education. Everybody come together, an open source platform for education tools that can then be built on that platform. And corporate America, I think, needs to come together and do this like yesterday.
So your book, Education is Freedom, the Future is in Your Hands, read it cover to cover, getting ready for this discussion with you. And I was just curious, like, what made you, and we all know it's important, but really double down on education as this huge opportunity?
It really came, I'll share with you the origin of the title of the book. It came from an experience I had walking across campus at Columbia University. I was going to teach a class and feeling pretty good about myself, having been a graduate of the school and now being asked to go back and teach. And I saw a young man walking toward me with a t-shirt on, and it said those three words, education is freedom. And it was one of those moments that you have, one of those life-changing moments. We can probably remember a handful of them in our life that really made me stop in my tracks and reflect on how important education was to getting me to the place I was, to the opportunity that I had had in life. And so it was a wake-up call for a couple of reasons. One, man, I wouldn't be here but for knowledge, but for the education that I've been able to gain over the years. And then even more importantly, it was a realization that I was still learning and I had to keep learning because that was what got me there, but it wouldn't get me to the next level. And so to enjoy freedom that I had been enjoying already and to continue enjoying freedom, I had to keep that learning process alive and make it part of my, just like working out or practicing an instrument, make it part of your everyday existence.
Yeah, for sure. So foundationally, the why, the how, the what, I don't know if it's important, the order. That's how you talk about it in the book. I've always thought why, what, and then the how becomes a lot more interesting going through. But explain what you mean by that.
Sure. I actually started with the what to learn. I wrestled with this question when I framed the book. And it's like writing a book is like building a house. You have to create a frame for the house, and then you add the walls and the roof, et cetera, et cetera. And I did try to deal with this issue of why. But honestly, it came toward the end because I had already had the what to learn and the how to learn. And I had friends challenge me on the why, and they were challenged me on the importance of education. And should we keep sending kids to school and blah, blah, blah. And I stepped back from it and then realized how powerful that why was. And I put it in three simple terms. I said, really our life is all about collaboration. And collaboration is what we learn in school, and with others, we are forced to get along with others in the classroom and in the schoolyard. And that's really our first exposure as children to having to collaborate outside of the family, to mix with people that aren't like us in different backgrounds. And that's the real world. The real world is we can't do things by ourselves. We're better off in corporate world, or whether it's church or the corporation or the community. We're better off with people. So that collaboration is critically important. And that's part of the more you know, the easier it is to be a collaborative and a contributing partner to collaboration. Then secondly, I referenced cultural literacy because with all of the debate about DEI and diversity, and there's a lot of angst around this issue of people being different. But net, if you cut through all the noise, we have more to learn from someone who's not like us than someone who's just like us. And so I've had the privilege of traveling all over the world, doing business in China and Japan and Europe, and every individual that I meet that is very different from me, I feel that I learned something from them, and I take a little of that with me. It becomes part of my DNA. I become like this patchwork quilt of people I've met from all over the world. And so I think that's an important part of learning. It's a big part of the why of learning, because the world is shrinking, and it's important for us to be able to deal with others. And then finally, the third piece of the why, I call character. And especially when I'm talking to young people, they really struggle with, oh, what is character and why is it important and blah, blah, blah. I describe it like this. I say, this is a brand. We all know what brands are. I'm an old retailer, so I can't help but put things in retail terms, right? So when you're in a store and you're looking for a beverage, let's say you're in a store in China, you'll see this brand. Now, right next to it will be a whole bunch of brands that you don't know. What are you more likely to trust? Because you know what's inside that brand. You know where it comes from. You know what it stands for. You know it has integrity of product. Well, our character is our brand, and it's our integrity. It's our gratitude. It's our humility. It's our compassion for others. It's those things that people feel and see when they encounter us. And so that character is an important part of the why of knowledge, because if we don't build knowledge, then our character is going to be very one dimensional and will not reflect that ability to collaborate, that ability to learn from others, that ability to mingle in the world, and be more than just a one-dimensional, thin, valueless brand, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. On the education side, what I've been saying for a while, and I feel like it's the last dot to connect, is the purpose of an education is to create value in the world. Not get a good grade, get a diploma, to get a degree, get a job. It's to create value in the world. And that's always kind of driven the why for me. And I'm fairly active in nonprofit efforts to improve conditions for K-12 students to learn. And starting with the whole why, like, why are we even doing this? Well, to create value. What's your value creation superpower? How would you like to create value in the world? All of a sudden, the light bulbs start to turn on. How does that land with you and fit into your system?
Oh, exactly. And the value is, often we think about value in monetary terms, right? How much are you worth? How much will you make? And I have to go to school to make money, et cetera, et cetera. On purpose, the book isn't education is wealth or education is salary. It's education is freedom, because to your point, the value that we are creating to the world is freedom in two ways. One, it's our personal freedom. The more I know, the more I can do, the more options I have, the more I can contribute to the world. And then on a grand scale, that's just for the individual. For society, the more people know, the more educated people are, the more we can replace ignorance, which leads to fear, which leads to anger, which leads to violence and hate. We replace that negative cycle with knowledge, which leads to understanding, which leads to hope, which leads to peace and happiness. So to me, that's an extension of your definition of value. Knowledge creates that value of an individual, but an individual in society that makes society a better place.
Yeah. Well, I like the way you talk in the book about, the more you learn, the more you can do and the more opportunities you will have. Totally agree. But I also think we have this giant mindset challenge in the country, because I'll listen to kids, and I've talked to thousands of high school kids about the virtues of entrepreneurship, and anybody that creates a job is a hero of mine because it's one more person that can support their family. And their attitude is, well, I'll never be able to go to college because my siblings haven't, nobody in my family ever has. I'm going to be stuck here because we don't have this or have that. Then I'll meet, kids that are newly here from places like Tanzania, and they'll look around the room and go, "You're all nuts. You have 99 times the opportunity that any of my friends back home have." So how do we bust through that? I think there's like this giant mindset issue.
Literally, you have just described the purpose of my book, because I am one of those kids that broke the mold. No one in my family went to college. My father and mother both quit school in grammar school. They didn't even go to high school. And none of my brothers and sisters went to school. Most of them did what kids in that group that you mentioned do. They say, well, I can't afford college anyway. I might as well just go get a job. Why am I wasting time in high school? It is such a trap, such a trap. And there's this, all of this negative narrative out there that's false narrative. Let me give you one. College is too expensive. It's not for everyone. Well, college may not be for everyone, but opportunity is, and the American dream is. And those first generation Americans that come here, they get that. They're like, I'm here for the American dream. Man, there's all kinds of opportunity. And our own inner city kids are being told and let other people tell them, it's not for you. No, it's not true. It's just not true. So let's talk about that college education cost. I keep hearing all this stuff, right? Oh, it's way more expensive today than it used to be. Wow. Man, it was pretty expensive for me too. And Forbes just came out with an article that spoke about college in 1980 was only $10,000 a year. I was close to when I graduated. I was like, yeah, but I was making $1.25 at McDonald's. $10,000 was huge. So I did the math. I actually ran the numbers. I said, what would $10,000 be in 2024? It's 50 grand. So why isn't anybody talking about, yeah, inflation went up, but so did the salaries, and so did the cost of everything went up. And then the other thing people are missing is, in 1980, I struggled finding scholarship support. Today, America is a very generous place. Endowments have gone through the roof. My little undergraduate school now is $1 billion endowment, and their discount rate, I sit on the board, so I get kind of insider look at these things. There's something that nobody talks about called a discount rate. Well, again, I'm an old retailer. I'm like, wait, you mean that $80,000 ticket sticker price is not really what anybody pays? It's like, well, yeah, some people do. So if you come from a very wealthy family and they can afford 80,000 a year, they're going to pay that. But if you come from inner city Detroit and you get accepted, you're going to likely get an average of 47% discount off that tuition in the form of financial aid. So it is, in many ways, it's a very negative myth that college is so much more expensive today than it used to be. In many, many ways, it's less of a burden today than it was 40, 50 years ago. But I'm out there trying to get people to look at a different point of view. Because the biggest thing, to your point, the last thing in the world we want to do is give these kids more of an excuse not to pursue opportunity.
Yeah, there must be something there in human nature that just says it's easier to be a victim, and I'm being told that this is okay, and that becomes sort of an identity, if you will. And to your point about scholarships, I've read several times over the last 10 years that there's billions unused every year in scholarship funds. So do your homework.
Exactly.
Go look for that stuff. It's there. That's what you
Exactly. And so that's why I worry. I'm out trying, literally. I just wrote a journal, an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal. I'm hoping they publish. I called it the hidden supply crisis in America. Because our trends have been abysmal. Our scores in math and science versus other developed nations have been declining, and our college graduation rates have been declining. Meanwhile, China, India, other countries have been ramping up and are now exceeding where we used to be before we started declining. So I call that from the perspective of a guy who ran a couple Fortune 500 companies, that's a supply crisis of educated employees well into the future that we've got to correct. But this narrative that's out there, I'm also trying to counter the narrative of I've got Mike Rowe, the famous TV show guy out.
Love him. Yeah.
Love him too, but I'm like, Mike, stop. You're talking about vocations. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But don't tell people that college is not for everyone, because what you're saying is the American dream's not for you. You know, you're better off going to be a plumber. Well, yeah, some people, yes, but don't don't give them another excuse, right? Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel's put $100,000 out there and said, just say no to college. Go be a tech entrepreneur. That's like Michael Jordan saying, go play basketball. You look at me. It worked for me. So I do think that we've got to, as adults, we've got to be super careful about the message we're sending to young people that reinforces their belief that it's not for me. I could never afford it. It's too expensive anyway. I might as well just go do something to make money now. That was the trap my parents got in, my siblings got in, and man, we've got to be really careful that we don't perpetuate that myth.
Yeah. Well, I think there's many paths for sure. And I love the way you talk about it in the book around you've got formal education, traditional, et cetera. And then you have this lifelong learning mindset. And it's what you're doing in the real world as you're creating value. I mean, for example, that's where I learned the most. So I came from a family that had a lot of issues and we were super low income, never felt like a victim. I never tell the story of, oh, I climbed out of this or did that. It's like, no, I'm here in the US. There's huge opportunities. But I'm on my seventh company I've started from scratch that I had controlling interest in. Biggest one, we're doing business in 60 countries around the world. Aerospace, got to meet. I went to most of them building the business, lots of amazing cultures and people. And I tried college 4 times and I'm sitting there listening to people, professors, that never did anything really in the real world, but they're great at analyzing data. So it makes you kind of connect dots better. I love that, the value there. Tell me this is how it works. And I'm in the real world doing it, running 3 or 4 businesses at a time going, no, that's not actually how it works. And where I learned the most was actually applying it and creating value in the real world. So get a capability, struggle to get it, builds confidence, use it to create value, keep taking bigger steps. So I guess my answer to and how I think about what you're saying is if college is your intentional part of your intentional path to create the value you want in the world, go for it. And there should be almost no obstacle that will keep you from getting there that you can't overcome. So that's how I think about it. It's not like only a required path in my view.
Right, right, right. And but Lee, I guess the here's the trap that people get in. They go, well, I don't really need college. What do they know anyway? I'll just go be an entrepreneur. Now, if you've got what you've got, which is persistence, determination, you are gonna be successful one way or another. And I've got a little of that in me too. Many of us need though the structure and discipline of a 4-year process, et cetera, et cetera. So I do worry a little bit about telling people, well, just don't worry about that college thing. Just go be an entrepreneur. Because as you know, it's hard. A lot of people don't have what it takes to the metal to get there. There's another thing I am also concerned about, and I'm trying to warn young people about this. You didn't need that degree, and you weren't going to need that degree because you're going to be successful one way or another. You are an entrepreneur. What happens to many people who try to be an entrepreneur and then don't have what it takes, then they go into the job market and they try to get a job and they don't have the credentials. Now, someday technology, we're gonna replace traditional credentialing with a way to measure with technology how much someone knows about one field or another. But today, from the perspective again of somebody who had 400,000 employees, how in the world do I pick between one candidate and another without that degree? it is truly, in at least in the next 20 years, probably a material disadvantage for someone who doesn't succeed as an entrepreneur. And then the other thing, one last thing I tell them is, even if you're a good entrepreneur, at some point you're going to need to raise money. When you're sitting in front of a bank, that if you can finish that degree, it's going to help you a little bit in getting that banker comfortable that you've got at least the traditional credentials, right? So there are some advantages, and but it's not, as you said, you can't just take a broad brush and say everybody should go to college. That's not the answer either. The right answer is learn as much as you can. Don't stop learning, however you can get it. And by the way, if you don't have the personal, and we all should know ourselves, if you don't have what it takes to go out and be an entrepreneur on your own, get that formal education, because you might need, some of us might need that structure in their life to be able to learn.
Yeah, 100%. And depending on the role, if you're getting into medicine or engineering, it's a ticket to play. You know, in my aerospace company, I would have 40 to 50 engineers at any point in time that were developing repairs, doing things, you know, that were going to be flying on aircraft. They better have their credentials, because if something ever happened, it's not we hired somebody off the street and trained them to do this thing, and the helicopter crashed.
But they stayed at a Holiday Inn, so they
they got sleep the previous night, and they're good to go. And I again, I kind of go back to, if you're clear on the value you want to create in the world, that becomes your North Star and the lens for how you make decisions about how you get there. And college can be an amazing path for that. Which college, I'm not even sure matters that much, because customers, with few exceptions, aren't buying the pedigree of the employees that created the product or service, right? Unless it's a consulting company and that's what they want. But with few exceptions, that doesn't matter. Talk about that.
I go back to the North Star, as you said, of knowledge, learn, however, wherever, don't stop. Now, then there's the practical side of me, the guy that had to go hire people, and the idea of having a form of differentiation, I think is just as I talked about, character is a differentiating factor, and it's pretty important. But it's hard to judge character when you're looking at a resume. You can judge, okay, this person went to a school that I know has very strong academic credentials. This person went to a school they got off the back of a matchbook. I don't want to be judgy here, but it's easier to differentiate yourself with those credentials. So there is some value to it. I say that it's such a delicate issue, because I don't want to sound like such an elitist saying, oh no, you should go to this fancy Ivy League school. But really, it's again, practical. It's, you have to differentiate yourself, and you're not going to be able to be standing in front of the banker, the employer, et cetera, for that first round of cuts. Your piece of paper is going to have to stand on its own. And the stronger your credentials, the better chance of success, that you'll at least get the opportunity.
Yeah, that's a fair point, depending on the position, the company, how they go after it.
Yeah.
I wish, Jim, that we had a way to measure the value an incoming prospective employee would be able to create for the organization and fit into the team. Doesn't matter where they go to college. I can't see that until they're in the door. So it gets you in the door, but then you're done if you don't create the value, right?
Right. And I think that'll come, Lee. I think over time, technology is going to get better and better at not only teaching and learning. We're going to have whole new ways to teach people more effectively. I'm excited about AI, because AI can modify the way a curriculum is taught based on the way a person's absorbing it. I mean, it's machine learning to enhance human learning if we use it right. So that to me is very exciting. But this idea of measurement is also going to change with technology. And I'll give you an example. In researching for the book, I didn't realize this. Did you know that American public schools were built by the industrialists really 100 years ago, primarily, to mass produce employees for the factories.
Yes, absolutely.
So even things like the bells, right, that announce class change, that came from the factory floor, shift change.
Mm-hmm.
So the standardized bell curve came from the way we measured performance of employees in the factory floor and measured their production on the floor. Everything was standardized. So we standardized mass production of students. We had to, it was a necessity. Students don't all learn the same way. They don't perform the same way. And now we're in the information age, but we're still using a school system that was built for the machine age, for the industrial age. So, what gives here? So, my premise is, and the call to action in the book is that if corporations are the demand for this supply of the human resources, then what do we do when we have a supply crisis? We go build, if we have chip problem, we go build chip factories, right? So why aren't we then investing collectively? He's got a point of view too. Why aren't we investing collectively in the use of technology to transform public schools or education? We've transformed retail. We've transformed space. Look at the internet. The internet wouldn't be if 20 different companies try to create their own. We said, let's create an open platform. That's what has to happen for education. Everybody come together, an open source platform for education tools that can then be built on that platform. And corporate America, I think, needs to come together and do this like yesterday. That not to replace the school or the teacher, but to dramatically supplement their ability to teach what they teach, how they teach using technology fixes so many issues, I think.
Yeah, I think AI can be used to create so much efficiency and value here, and it can be absolutely incredible. And my experience, unfortunately, dealing with state legislatures on bills that will benefit or not benefit K-12 students and even college students, is that it's mostly adults fighting over money, and it's both sides of the aisle, and it's not creating better conditions to work, live, learn, and play for the citizenry, and especially for the kids. So when I look at the challenges with the current state of education, it's crony capitalism or game rigging that's causing most of the problems. We're not even creating, in my opinion, 10% of the value that we could create as a country. And then you think about the whole world. So how do we get through that and these inherent horrible conflicts of interest? Because more money we put in, the worse the results get for K-12 students. Isn't that a big alarm bell?
It is to me, and what my call to action, and at this point, I'm just a little voice in a hurricane, but all of these issues, I was turned down for an interview because I didn't have the right answer on school choice. I didn't have the right answer on cost of college. I didn't have an answer on schools indoctrinating children, all this stuff. And what my answer is, and the reason it's not the right answer, is you guys are fighting yesterday's problems. All of these problems are with the existing school system based on state and local taxation, which is never, ever going to solve this dilemma. What the answer is, I think, is for us to invest together in technology to completely transform the way we teach and learn, not to modify it with school choice. That fixes some things and it breaks other things, not to try to modify it with, you know what it is? Here's the way I describe it. It's like we're giving people aspirins when they have cancer. It's saying, this will make you feel better. And it may make you feel better for a little while, but it's not really the cure for the problem. The cure for the problem is to do what the Rockefellers and others did 100 years ago, build an entirely new system based on the technologies we have available at our fingertips today that will educate people for the information age that we are now in, recognizing that the existing system wasn't built for this. Um, and we can do that, but we have to, we're not going to do it with state and local government support. This is where I believe corporations need to recognize this as a supply crisis and step up and say, we can't be bystanders here. We're the number one beneficiary of an educated workforce. We've got to invest in this technology that will do a better job of changing, of educating future workers for our needs.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying. And so one of my questions was going to be, but you just answered it. What would it take to get government at all levels to make this change when they're so entrenched in, again, in my view, just adults fighting over money, not about the kids. And I love the idea of corporate America just taking it away from government, put it in the hands of parents and get these kids doing all the stuff that you and I are talking about. It'd be a way better world for us to age out in, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, and it's not even, there's just only so much government can do. And unfortunately, we're in this stage now of politically speaking, it's not unique to the United States. It's happening all over the world where we've got this polarization. And you think about all the issues that you and I could both fix if we had 3 hours to sit down with a blank sheet of paper. And yet they don't get fixed for 20, 30, 40 years because they're more valuable as a weapon against the other point of view than they are as a something that's been solved. And we've got to be really careful. Education is veering down that path to become one of those issues that it's better to fight about it than it is to fix it. So let's just keep it out there broken, and let's keep debating all of the issues around it rather than truly stepping back and coming up with comprehensive education reform. And that's why I say I don't have high hopes that it will get fixed in our lifetime anyway with government alone. But the real beneficiary isn't at the table right now, and that's corporate America.
Yeah. Well, I like the way you say in the book, education is the future of humanity. Talk about that. I'm aligned.
Yeah, I wanted to make the title, the subtitle is "The Future is in Your Hands," and the publisher wouldn't let me use the original title, which I wanted to say "A Self-Help Guide for Humanity." They were like, "Who do you think you are, Gandhi or something? Come on." But I said, no, I truly, truly believe that humanity is its own worst enemy. And much of it stems from fear and ignorance. And think about it, in today's world, we are still blowing each other up with tanks. Humans blowing up other humans with tanks. And you go, are we not more progressed as a species than to have to resort to trench warfare, basically, to solve our issues? What causes that? And if you dig down inside of it, which I tried to do for the book, I looked at history, and I looked at history of wars and confrontations and battles, and everything ultimately is based in fear or control, to control someone with fear, and control someone with ignorance. If you keep a population ignorant, it's easier to control them. And then you throw in a little fear, it's really easy to control them, right? So I looked for who can I find that can really say this best. And I found an ancient Greek philosopher, but I couldn't even pronounce his name. Then I found Yoda saying the same thing. So I used Yoda. No, and it was great. Yoda was teaching Luke about the Force, and he was talking about ignorance causing fear, and fear causes anger, and anger causes violence, and that the antidote to that was he was teaching Luke the power of knowledge and the power of light and the power of faith and the power I say faith because that was the force. I thought the force was a metaphor for faith, and it didn't matter if it was Buddhism or Christianity or whatever, but the faith that he had brought to the table gave him the strength and the confidence to go on. Well, that powerful combination of knowledge and faith, whatever your faith based is, I think is the antidote to fear and ignorance, which ultimately we could get in a cycle of understanding, knowledge leading to hope, leading to understanding, leading to peace. It's a far better cycle for humanity to be in than one of fear and violence. And it sounds crazy, crazy to even suggest that the cure for humanity's issues is knowledge and light. But I think there's something there.
Well,
I really believe it.
100%. And, I have this vision of the future. Let's just stop killing each other when we have disagreements. And if two global leaders really have a problem they can't work out, let's create a UN that has an octagon in the middle of it, and we send those leaders in. They can't send a proxy, and they got to do it themselves, so they can feel the weight of sending our citizenry to die, which is just terrible. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of leaders globally, they leverage the value of this conflict of having one side against the other, and they don't really want to fix it. It's like K-12 education in the United States. I don't think a lot of our elected officials really want to fix it. It's better to sit in the middle and leverage the conflict.
But this is exactly where the more people can amass the more knowledge, then hopefully we can rise above that, because it's far easier to manipulate people through fear if they don't have the knowledge, if they are ignorant of the facts. And, there's another interesting angle here that as I went through history and tried to understand, okay, what about societies that had a lot of knowledge that did still some pretty heinous things? How'd that work? I stumbled across a premise called militant ignorance, which was fascinating to me. And that was the idea that when you surround yourself with people that only think just like you can then convince yourself that something is true, even if it isn't, even if it goes completely against your normal human values, because you're surrounding people that reinforce that belief. You can get yourself into a position of truly militant ignorance. In other words, you are so entrenched in that belief that you will fight to the death over something that you really intellectually know is wrong, but you don't let yourself believe it because you're reinforced in it.
It reminds me of that movie, Don't Look Up, and the meteors or the comets coming, and half the world is saying it's not, and the other half says it is. Just look up. No, it's not. It's like, are you kidding me? So in the book,
exactly,
one of the points you make, maybe one of the most powerful points in the book for me is your view of the world based on genuine critical thinking capabilities that you've cultivated, or has it been curated? Right? Which is this category that we're getting at here. What can you say right now that'll fix this for the whole world and they'll never fall for that again? Having it curated, right? It's, yeah, please.
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question, and that is that curated view of the world is what can lead to that militant ignorance, because and unfortunately, social media is a prime vehicle for curating content. Right, the algorithms are going to feed you content that meet your curated desires and needs. So it kind of gets worse and worse and worse. The antidote to that, the only antidote to that, is awareness. So that that's why you might recall the whole chapter on critical thinking, going back to Socrates. It's amazing. In the course of researching the book, I was amazed at the refresher on Greek and the ancient philosophers, not just the Greek philosophers, but all of the ancient philosophers. I don't know what these guys did, but they would sit around and pontificate on life. And so much of their teaching is so relevant today because the power of critical thinking that they observed at the time, Socrates at the time was challenging the leadership and the government by asking why and asking critical questions that they couldn't answer and creating crisis, all kinds of problems for himself and, people around him. But he was trying to get at the heart of why. And if we would just do that more as individuals and truly ask why, not in a confrontational way, but truly understand and try to understand why the other person has their point of view, we could, I think, produce the resistance to this curation that's going on. Same applies for students in the classroom. If your teacher has a point of view, they're human. They're going to give you a point of view, but it doesn't mean you have to believe that point of view. You can still learn from their point of view and take an opposite point of view, if allowed.
Yeah, and exactly. And I find it helpful to have filters. So when I think about government, create better conditions to work, live, learn, and play for the citizenry at a lower and lower relative cost over time, I think that's their job. And there's a lot that goes into that. And so anything I hear that somebody's proposing, I'm running it through my filters.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so to talk about that, because I think a lot of folks just go right to confirmation bias and they just believe whatever's been curated in their feed.
Oh, yeah. No, exactly. I listen to equal doses. In fact, I'll have it on two screens. I have CNN on one and Fox News on the other. And to me, it's hysterical to listen to the difference in point of view. And I'm human, so I will drift one way or another on any given issue. But then I try to check myself and say, okay, how much of this is swayed by they're trying to rile up their base, their audience, and that they're building viewers by stoking more fear. And both of them are guilty of it. And it's kind of fun to watch. In fact, I challenge anyone that's watching this now. Turn on both of them, listen to the different point of view, and think about how much of that is fear-based versus hope-based. Is anyone out there using, well, here's a problem, but here's the solution. Maybe there's a silver lining in this problem. We could turn this into opportunity. I'm not hearing a lot of that in any of the channels that I'm listening to. And that's a good way for me to then separate out, okay, well, do I really believe that, or do I know they're just stoking the fires because it's going to help build audience and they're helping to anger people with it?
That's actually one of the best filter advice I've ever heard. Is it based or gin up the base, or hope based? So if we just look at the two, because I'll read the same story being covered in the Wall Street Journal, go to the New York Times, like, oh my gosh, did they look at the same thing?
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely different. And it's almost always ginning up the base. It's fear based, like you're talking about, not here's what happened and this is what's possible and how we work through it and get there together and collaborate, like you talk about in the book.
Yeah, exactly. And that's if we could just figure out a way to get our media to not only point out the problems, but discuss practical solutions that might be able to be embraced by both sides of the argument, people on both sides of the argument. It would be interesting, but there's not enough of that hope out there. But I do have hope. I had this conversation with a couple of former presidents about the state of society, and are we getting worse and worse and worse with this curated point of view and more challenges and polarization. And to a person, everyone in that chair that I've had the privilege of having that discussion with says that they have such belief in democracy that they believe an inspirational leader will arise, that someone who truly can reverse the cycle of fear and bring back inspiration and hope. Um, for me as a kid, that was JFK, and my dad didn't think so. My dad was not a big fan of JFK, but as a kid, I saw him as such a hopeful person. He said we're going to land on the moon in 10 years, and it was all about, to me, inspiration as opposed to, um, you know, compounding fear. Now, I was also 5 years old or something at the time, so I'm not sure that's a relevant example, but I do believe someone will arise and lead us in a better direction.
I mean, this feels like a natural ebb and flow throughout millennia, really,
Yes,
and times get easy and these things happen, and then it gets hard, and then we level set and we do all that. But I think what you're touching on for me is that there's just a huge lack of capable and moral leadership. Like there's a lot of great capable leaders out there that are having a negative effect, I would say, on the world when it comes to value creation. But capable and moral leaders are in demand right now, and I think that may be the single biggest problem on the planet.
it is. I think you're right, and if we can encourage people to embrace those things that I tried to outline in the books, I don't think this is rocket science. I really believe people have the innate ability to wrap their heads around critical thinking skills and curiosity again, and creativity, and all of those things that are the ingredients of building individual knowledge. I really believe we're capable of it. And as you said, I hope this is just a cycle that we're in. And my book is an attempt to build followers in this idea that we can be better. Humanity can be better than this. It's in the power. The future is in our hands, literally.
I'm super hopeful. I know in my heart of hearts that we're going to get there, and that this is normal ebb and flow, and these leaders, like you say, will come out and they'll change it. You changed the culture in a really good way at 7-Eleven. I think you came in super late in the game with Blockbuster, and you were dealt an amazing challenge as I think about that. Um, but you could change the culture pretty quickly, right? And so what would it take to
Yes,
change the culture in the country? And it could be one or two leaders that just flip this whole thing on its head and make creating value cool again and not complaining about everything and what's wrong with the world.
exactly. And I'm optimistic that will emerge. Probably not going to be an old guy like me. It's probably going to be a younger person that's going to step up and say, "Hey, aren't we all tired of this fighting?" and take a leadership role. Um, I hope it happens globally, because I do see so many of the well I, on the cover of the book, by design, I have an image of the world, and I have an image of this constellation of satellites, um, on purpose, because I truly believe that technology is, to some extent, going to help us overcome this, because it is shrinking the world. It is going to, through necessity, force us to work with other cultures and kind of get over ourselves in some way and realize we're all in this together. And if we don't figure out how to work together in this completely interconnected world that is more and more interconnected every single day, um, that we're all gonna implode. So I'm very optimistic that in the hands of, well, here's an example. Right here is an absolute portal to unlimited learning.
Mm-hmm.
Unlimited learning.
Yeah, the iPhone, any smartphone, right?
Exactly. You read in the book, I grew up with borrowed encyclopedia or encyclopedias my mom brought home from the grocery store. That's all I had. And look what I've been able to accomplish. I'm not saying that in a braggadocious way, but I've been able to accomplish that from starting with a set of encyclopedias. What if I had the ability to start with this? I can't even imagine what would be possible. That's what that's what we have now. We have children now all over the world connected in places that never even had access to books, and now they'll have access to Wi-Fi and technology and learning. The power of that grassroots building of knowledge worldwide, I think, is something that you and I can't even comprehend how powerful that can be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
And I think a critical piece here is going to be embracing struggle, because we're taking struggle away from kids, trying to take it away from adults. And yet that made some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. It made you, it made me. I wouldn't change anything.
Right.
And the good struggle, the healthy struggle, the unhealthy struggle, and all of it. So if we learn to embrace and trust that and do what you just said and leverage this from this foundation, it would be just incredible. And I think globally, this is my view. One of the biggest deterrents to conflict is how interconnected commerce is globally. It's like, well, if we blow up the neighbor, then all of our economy falls down, right? So
Yeah.
I like that piece of it. And when I travel the world, there's all these cool differences. Yay. But I look for the commonalities. People want to be healthy and happy, support their families, trade their best efforts for the best efforts of others. They want freedom, even in countries I went to where they didn't really have that. So I look at all of that, and then I look at 7-Eleven and how it sounded like it was an epiphany for you to go, wait a minute, this is the American dream for immigrants. It's the enabler for, immigrant entrepreneurs. How amazing and cool was that?
Yeah. It was phenomenal. And I didn't know it. I tell the story in the book about how I was embarrassed by Jay Leno because he gave me an award one time and he said, "Oh, 7-Eleven guy that speaks English." Yeah, everybody laughed and I was all embarrassed by it. And it took 9/11 to happen. And our stores getting bricks thrown through windows and people attacking our franchisees for me to step back and go, "Whoa, wait, we are mostly foreign born individuals. Why is that?" And I started asking, well, why are you a franchisee? How did you get here? And it was a beautiful story. They told me to a person the story of the American dream. I came here at $500 in my pocket, and many of them had a degree from another country, but they couldn't get a job here. So they worked really hard in the 7-Eleven, hard enough to buy a franchise, and then brought family in and educated them. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful story of the American dream. And I thought, wow. In fact, we celebrated our 75th anniversary on Ellis Island, called 125.
I love that.
Yeah, called franchisees in from all over the world. We had 125 different nations represented there, and celebrated the idea that in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, we celebrated the American dream. And I told the story. I don't know if I put it in the book. I think I did. One of my franchisees happened to live in the same apartment building in New York City, in Manhattan. It was a crappy little place because I could barely afford it. It was, and he was living there. I was living there at the same time. We didn't know it. We discovered this later when he was the head of the franchise association and I was CEO of the company. We started talking about where we started and living in New York, and we were in the same building, like 2 floors apart, and 2 different paths to the American dream. He was actually making more money than I was as a franchisee with like 3 stores, and I was CEO of the company. And it's a beautiful story. We both told that story on Ellis Island to this group of franchisees from around the world. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's infinitely replicatable all over America if we just recognize the power um, of the American dream and how to get it. And it starts with knowledge.
Yeah. I work with a lot of companies in my business today. I'm invested in a lot. I'm on boards, and one of the companies has, gosh, 15, 1,600 team members in the Philippines. I would hire on average their work ethic every day over the American work ethic today. In fact, often when one of those folks gets placed into another organization, they're doing 3 times the work and asking for more. And so we've got a challenge here with work ethic. How will education help that in your view?
I don't know if I don't know if education will solve all of the problems, but I think what it does is it will create more of a groundswell, if you will, of competition and differentiation that will make us all realize we can't just coast, because somebody else is going to be there to take my job. Today, it's kind of easy to assume that we're safe and we get comfortable and we make more and more money doing less and less work. Um, I think the more we all provide each other with more education, then we create more natural competition, and we sort of lift all boats, if you will. Collectively, you saw that in America during World War II. You saw that work ethic be there. Um, so I do have hope, but we've got to get ourselves out of the cycle that we're in now. We're not in a great place now, but there's a solution. That's the good news.
Yeah. I'm still going for it. I haven't had to work for a long time if it's just about the money, and I love it. I'm never going to stop. I'm going to push these holistic value creation behaviors into the world. You're in the same boat. You're still in the game. I think it's just about getting them on the track, and then they'll probably never get off because it feels so good, like the intrinsic motivation and all of that just gets better. Self-esteem, everything gets better.
It does. It does. It's why I'm trying to share the message, because I want more people to um, really enjoy the kinds of freedoms that you and I enjoy. And it's possible. But you've got to have the courage to get off that hamster wheel. I got to keep making money. I got to keep making money. I've got to be wealthy. I got to be this. What the end game is, I think, is to enjoy life. And the more you have, the more knowledge you have, the more freedom you have to do those things that, like you're doing right now with music. I love where you are. To me, as a frustrated musician, to be broadcasting from doing a podcast from a studio, that's like, wow, I want one of those.
Yeah. Well, if you ever make it to Phoenix, you're welcome anytime. I'll host you here at the studio. We'll play music, coffee, whatever you want. I really applaud that you're taking all these lessons from the C-suite, the way you describe it, and making it available for the masses in a way that they could consume and make their lives better. From this conversation, what's your one biggest takeaway today, if you have one?
Well, I love the way you've challenged me to think through on the value side. I think that's helped to um, modify the way I'm thinking about some of these things. And one of the things that you may have picked up is that the definition of uh, confidence that keeps you from being arrogant. And I have to be careful myself, because I think I'm so confident in my point of view and in the things I'm teaching that I can go across that line with arrogance. But I believe, in fact, it was Norman Vincent Peale that used to teach power of positive thinking, but he also taught the power of humility. Humility being the recognition that you always have more to learn. And so I've learned from you today, and I appreciate that, because this idea of the values base, I think, will frame my thinking going forward in the way I describe freedom and things like character. So I do appreciate that. And, hopefully your audience will have walked away with learnings from you and from me. Maybe they'll take a couple of little nuggets away. And if we can change one life and make one person find more joy and more happiness and give back to this world in a better way, I think we've accomplished our mission.
Yeah, for sure. And you've helped me think more deeply and even improved how I think about thinking, reading the book, our conversation here. So thank you for all that. If our listeners want to learn more about what you're doing, you've got a nonprofit that you've founded. How can they find out more about you?
Yeah, easiest way is jameswkeys.com. I've got a website with a link to the book and to the foundation. The foundation is really more targeted toward children and helping advise young people in school. But the book hopefully is a broader audience, and both young people and business people I'm finding are a big audience for the book. My objective, though, and if there's a takeaway that your audience has, if they do find the things that we talked about today to be interesting, I don't want this book. I didn't write it to have somebody put it on the shelf and say, "Oh, isn't that nice? Looks pretty in my library." I want it to be a gift that if you do read the book, and Lee, I hope you'll do this with yours, put it in the hands of somebody who needs it, who needs to have some of these soft skills and a reminder that knowledge really is the key to opportunity. So I appreciate the opportunity to share the message with you and your audience. And I hope people will not only learn something from it, but also pay it forward and share that learnings with others.
100%. And I recommend the book for all the listeners, and I'll definitely recommend it to the different groups of CEOs that I work with. There's just a lot here for sure. And if we get a chance to talk again, I want to dig into lessons learned at 7-Eleven, Blockbuster, and so much more. Again, thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation. If you got value out of today's episode, please like and leave a review. And until next time, please show your value to the world.